My name is Andrew Scyner. I'm currently actually on leave from the European Commission. I have to qualify that. I just want to introduce myself a little bit. I've been working on partnerships for much of my career. I'm a career public servant. I've worked for Canada, I've worked for the World Bank, and I've worked for the last 10 years for the European Commission. I worked on partnership issues in Vietnam 20 years ago with the World Bank when Vietnam was a low-income country. Many things have changed since then, and that's mostly thanks to those of you who are in the room who put your time and effort and resources and finance into this transition. So today we're talking about the low carbon transition. We've heard from the finance side. We've heard from, how would I say, the big money. And I think today, or right now, what we're going to do is talk about people who have invested in solutions for SMEs and for households. So what I would like to do is ask our panelists quickly to introduce yourselves, just say who you are and really why you're here. Tu, can we start with you?
Thank you, Andrew. I guess before introducing myself, I just want to have a sense of who's in the audience. Can you give us a show of hand if you are investing? Come on. Higher. Okay, investors. So entrepreneurs in the room, you know who are the investors. So who are entrepreneurs in the room? Great. Corporates. Okay. People who visiting outside of Vietnam. Okay. So I guess majority of you are actually working on some sort of solutions in Vietnam already. So we'll try to be helpful and supportive to your different initiatives. My name is Tu. I'm Vietnamese. I am an entrepreneur and then turned investor. But in my way of operating, I think of investing as a way of building businesses as well. And I am here because I love Vietnam. That's my country. I also want to echo what Andrew said. We here in this panel to talk about small money. But every big money used to be small money. Every big company used to be a small company. So we'll see how this conversation can help us think about some of these issues.
Thanks, Tu. Linda, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Mock. I'm from Sarona Asset Management. We are a fund of funds specializing in investing in impact as well as in emerging markets. My reason for being here and my main responsibility at Sarona really is to manage a special mandate from the Australian government called the Australian Development Investments. So this is a 250 million Australian dollar program targeting to invest in SME funds in the Indo-Pacific region, of which Vietnam, of course, is a very important market. And it's really specialized in focusing in two areas, one of which is climate, which is the reason why I'm here today. And also through our investment, we hope to promote more gender equality. So I'm very happy to be here, and I hope to be able to engage more with everybody here today. Thanks.
I think we have gender equality on the panel. Andy, if I may call you Andy, over to you. Who are you and why are you here?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, so my name's Andy. I'm a former banker turned climate change entrepreneur. So I used to actually work in Tim's team in Vietnam. And I was at HSBC for over 10 years and previously in some other banks in Australia. I worked in Vietnam, Hong Kong as well. You know, I guess the reason why I'm here is to show that that we need to develop new kinds of business models to support on the energy transition. I think we're all going through this process in a way, learning together. But what I could see from the time when I was in the bank that there's a very big commitment towards green financing, but I think banks are still learning how to support in this household SME sector and really haven't nailed it, particularly in Asia and particularly in Southeast Asia. But we do see that there are models that are working very well and at scale in, say, the United States or Australia. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So, could you let's go straight to the nub of the question. You are CEO of Stride. Could you explain what Stride's platform is and the financing mechanisms to support energy transitions? So, how does Stride deploy capital to support Vietnamese households and SMEs to access the energy transition?
Yeah. So basically what Stride is it's supporting solar energy and other energy efficiency products for the household and small and medium-sized business sector. And it does that by, we've developed a platform which connects customers together with solar installers and then also investors together. And by connecting these three important players together, it will allow for a large-scale adoption of clean energy. Okay, and basically, to give a bit more practical example, so there may be a small business that wants to decarbonize, they want to reduce their energy consumption and have a lower electricity bill. That's probably the main reason why in that sector they want to adopt solar energy. Then, until we come along, actually, most of these companies cannot actually access loans, they can't access capital, so that they need to pay for the installation upfront, right? And depending on the size of that installation, it could be from $10,000 right up to $100,000 or $200,000. And banks either not supporting or they would take collateral land, and the process is quite cumbersome. So what we saw was an opportunity here where we could make a frictionless process, very fast assessment and approval, and then we could get that solar installation, effectively financed in a very fast way. This kind of model it's already there in the US, and there are unicorn companies already doing that in Australia as well. But there's not really anyone doing that in Southeast Asia. And we can see in Vietnam, it's the number one adopter of solar energy in the Southeast Asia. Thailand's number 2, but at a very much a distance. So Vietnam is absolutely dominating in the region. But most of the focus has really been on the large end of town corporates, right? Large corporates. And we're talking about millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of investments. But there hasn't really been that focus on household and SME yet, which is very interesting because in Australia or the US, it's completely opposite, where most of the take-up on solar is in household and SME, and now they're just starting to do utility scale. But in Vietnam, it's been opposite, where it's been utility and large corporates driving it thus far.
Okay, so what I hear from you is that actually your main target are actually the people who are currently underserved,
Exactly.
Households and SMEs. I don't know if you want to add any more detail about that. Numbers, for example, what the real impact might be at a household level.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the segment itself, it's a huge opportunity, right? So we're talking about a $10 billion opportunity just in Vietnam alone, and I think in Asia, you can probably times that by 10. So the opportunity is there. And I guess in terms of, say for a household, what we're really focusing on is a mass-scale adoption of rooftop solar. Now, we know with PDP 8, the government has stated that 50% of all households should adopt solar energy, right? But just because the government says that doesn't mean it will happen. So that you need various support mechanisms, because at the moment, there are barriers, and the barrier really is the upfront cost that most households don't have $5,000 or $10,000 spare just to invest in solar energy, even though it will pay for itself, it will pay off quite quickly, and they will have very good benefits from it, but they just don't have that money available. So that's where I guess the financing part becomes crucial to help, I guess, fund this segment. And again, that's why I go back to the US. Australia, if you look 10 years ago, uptake of solar was fairly low, and it's really once players come in who could support on the financing at speed and do it in a very smart way, that's when we could see that there was mass adoption of solar energy.
So you've come in at speed and with financing, but in order to be able to do that, you needed to find investors. Yeah. Now, what were the main challenges for you in finding the investment for Stride and its innovative business model? Yeah,
so for us, I guess there's two aspects where we need to raise capital. One is on the equity side, and that's for our operations and product development. The other is for debt, so that we can finance and support these solar installations. On the equity side, I guess the early challenges were, a lot of investors want to see that you've already got a track record, but that's very difficult when you have limited capital. So for our company, Stride, it was financed purely amongst the founders. So it was our own cash that we put up to actually, develop the company, and also the financing side. And that's obviously a big impost on the a big burden for the founders, but we believed in this so much that we were willing to commit our own money and wanted to show others that it would work. I think then the key is finding the right kind of investors. We can, if you speak to investors that are looking for $1 billion company, within the next 5 years, already have a track record, well, that's pretty rare. There's not many companies in Vietnam right now, right, and that have a track record already, right, and those companies already have lots of options. So you have to look for investors that are willing to commit early, and looking at, I think, supporting climate change, looking at the financials, but also looking and considering the social impact as well. On the debt side, it's been actually more challenging than equity, to be honest. So on the debt side, again, we do see a large number of like DFIs out there, banks, with very big commitments on climate change, but generally they won't get out of bed in the morning for a minimum of 10 million, but more likely they're looking to deploy 20, 50 million. So again, it's the same problem. Well, if there are only financing companies that are already there, that already need 20 or 50 million dollars, who are the new players who can enter into this market, right? Because this is a wide open space. This is very brand new in Southeast Asia. So that's where we look for some solutions, potentially in terms of, equity and venture debt as one possible way. And also there's other companies we've found, mainly coming from Europe, who are also doing innovative business models, such as crowdsourcing. And, they want to deploy capital in emerging markets, and they do that from Europe around the world. And their criteria is a little bit lower than what, say, a DFIs, etc., are. And, we're working with one of those companies at the moment, and that's very crucial, very important to us.
So here's a nice segue into Touchstone. Touchstone is one of your investors. Maybe we can now hand off to Tu, who is the general partner from Touchstone. Why, Tu, did Touchstone, choose to invest in Stride?
I think luckily we didn't ask Andy when can Stride have 100 million in revenue, so that's why he let us invest in his company. I think Andrew was very humble. Not only did he work with Tim, he was the COO of HSBC Vietnam. And his co-founder, Leo, was the risk management country officer of Citibank in Vietnam. So I was like, these two guys are crazy, right? And as investor, as an entrepreneur, that can be a good thing. So you want to disrupt the status quo. And at the same time, with their expertise in risk management, they were able to show us the most detailed risk management processes that we've seen across our different portfolio. So that helps us have more confidence into the founders and the plan. And of course, in the case of Andy and Leo, they were crazy enough to put their own money in as the first lender to the different projects that use Stride. Would you mind if I disclose the amount? All right. Size.
More than I like to.
Yeah, so I wish we would have met them earlier. And that's a learning for Touchstone. When we talked to Andy and Leo, for the first year of their journey, they went to energy forum conferences, but they were not at the startups venues. So for us, and as an investor, that's a signal. So we need to go elsewhere. We need to go and meet people who working on climate, on energy, instead of just being on the, the online AI side of the world. I mean, there's a merit to that, but we here for as Touchstone to solve big problems for Vietnam, and we know climate is a huge area to focus on, so we need to also transition our strategy. So, on the bigger picture-wise, in the macro landscape, a lot of our investment thesis is based on how Stride makes things more affordable. So in this case, solar panel. It's very similar to how we invest when we invest in mobility in an EV company called Selex, or how we invest in agri-tech company called Forte. Both of them really set the price point to be really affordable. And because of the technology solutions, because of the products, they will be able to make a margin out of it. So that's the innovation that we want to support, we want to nurture, we want to be partner for. It's not easy. So we, for Stride, for them to unlock the first debt funding from Europe, they need to disperse a certain amount of loan. And as equity investor, we were comfortable for them to use part of our investment for that, so that later on, when the debt threshold is met, they'll be able to prove to the lenders that they can scale this model. And Andy was like, "Oh, since your investment, we've grown, the solar panel installed in Vietnam to 10x." I'm like, "Wow, okay, keep on the good work momentum." And Andy, yesterday we were having like a small gathering for the speakers, and I think Andrew asked Andy why Touchstone invests in Stride. And Andy was like jokingly, because we make money and we offer low valuation, as a joke, right? But I think that this space justify a lot more early stage investors so that the valuation can be more competitive and higher and more friendly to the founders.
It's a huge potential market. So Stride shouldn't be alone in this particular market, and Touchstone should not be alone in this particular market either. So, from your experience, how can other investors advance these kinds of inclusive climate and energy solutions? Do?
It's a little bit like left brain and right brain working together, right? So we need to be creative, sitting together with the founders and understanding what the problems are, to build the ideas and the vision together with them. But on the right brain, it's like, okay, so how can the business model make sense? I think for Touchstone, for the first 2 years, we felt like we were quite lonely. A lot of our peers who co-invested with us are overseas. And because of that, then the confidence into the Vietnam market has not always been there. And this is, there's no right or wrong answer. This is just whether you believe in the 10-year macro story of Vietnam, so that you're willing to spend time and efforts listening to the founders building things in Vietnam. So it's like holding the 10-year vision as the anchor, but willing to do the small step of sitting down, working with the founders. I know it's fuzzy, but it is a lot of those efforts, because if there's another fund from wherever coming to Touchstone and ask, hey, who are the big companies? What are the big opportunities to invest in climate? We early, so we don't have those stories to tell you. So we're looking for partners who are willing to build the ecosystem with us, rather than like, hey, pointing you to like a certain name, because it's not there yet.
Okay, so long-term vision, practice step by step. Let's now go to you, Linda. Be interesting to hear your perspective from the private equity or impact investment side. What's the potential, say, for Sarona and also blended finance to accelerate inclusive and innovative climate and energy solutions? And how is Sarona, as a mid-market private equity investor, approaching the Vietnam market in this concern?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, a slight clarification there. I think mid-market really differs a lot. It can be quite a different definition depending on which market you're talking about. And the segment of the market that Sarona and the ADI program really hopes to focus on is, I think, more on the smaller side, pretty much what Du said, ecosystem building. Right. So very often we would like to, through our concessionary capital, look to catalyze more private investors into this segment. After all, if you look at the 250 million Australian dollar, this is really a pin drop in the ocean that is required to get to the big targets that Vietnam has set. Right. And so by working with fund managers, what we do hope is very often we invest in these first-time managers, emerging managers with innovative strategies that really target on the smaller scale the individual businesses as well as the households. But for these managers, what they do need is something quite different from just equity investment. We are very often the first institutional investor they speak with. We spend a lot of time coaching GPs on how to structure their fund, how to come up with a strategy that is meeting an unaddressed segment of the market. And so through our investment, we can be quite agnostic as well. Of course, we are there in the first close. We do very often introduce other potential LPs to anchor their first close, to ensure that the GPs do get to a minimum size so that it can be sustainable, right? But beyond that, I think in terms of the modality of our investment, we can invest both in equity as well as in debt. In some instances as well, we can choose a hybrid structure. For instance, one of the funds that we're currently working on, they first approached us, asking us to be an anchor investor in their first close. But after several months of discussion, we realized this GP is really not yet ready to go to market. And if they were to launch today, they'll probably be in market for a very long time. So what we have decided to do now is to take that away and offer a long-term loan to the GP instead, to help them, and through our technical assistance program as well, to get some of the systems and processes in place so that they can be much more institutionalized. And once they launch the market, they'll be perceived better vis-a-vis the other more established players out there in the market as well. And our lending can be quite flexible. We can be long-term, we can be short-term, depending on the needs of the company. We can invest in the local currency so that we take the FX risks rather than the SME funds themselves. Another interesting project that we're currently working on, for instance, in our portfolio, we are in a private debt fund that lends to very much the kind of businesses that will require financing, but perhaps they're not able to pay that high interest rate. And they're in very emerging, even frontier markets. So from a private investor perspective, that can be quite risky. So we try to take that risk away. So by doing that, we have structured ourselves into a first loss tranche. So we take 20% of the losses of the fund. And that leaves the private investor to take the stable cash flows on a quarterly basis, even though at a maybe slightly reduced rate from commercial, but it meets certain impact targets for these investors. And that leaves us, at the end of the day, a much more palatable and attractive investment opportunity for the investors.
Thanks. A lot of the speakers here have spoken about the notion of technical advisory services, and also the need to leverage philanthropy or development grants for technical assistance services. Can you speak to how this gets delivered through a form of blended financing to support capacity building in the market? Where has this worked well or best? Maybe some examples.
Sure. What I didn't mention at the onset is prior to joining Sarona, I was with the DFI for 7 years. So I've had some years of experience working on technical assistance programs for clients in this region. And I would say that about 8 years back when I first started on this journey, talking to fund managers in Asia about helping them set up ESG monitoring and management systems, I would usually get rejected. And for the larger GPs, they would say, we don't need it because the LPs are not asking for it today. For the smaller GPs, they have more important things to do, right? And less resources on hand. Even though we said we are fully able to sponsor most of the costs of doing this, it is really a lot of resource from the team. But I think today, what I'm very happy to hear, having been part of that conversation, I think most of the GPs today are at least signatories to the UNPRI. ESG is no longer something that is additional, something that they just tag on to do their marketing. Some of our fund managers are even gone ahead to get themselves B Corp certified. And today, I think what we're really working on is getting this 2X criteria incorporated as well into a lot of the business operations. But I think to your point, Andrew, I think the way we're doing it at ADI really is on both the fund level, and I think what's interesting is we also offer technical assistance to the underlying investee level as well. So in addition to a lot of our fund commitments, we also put aside certain capital with each of our commitments to offer technical assistance programs to the underlying SME companies in the portfolio. And we do that in a fairly bespoke manner. But first of all, on the fund level, I think this is quite a standard repertoire now that a lot of DFIs are also doing, which is helping the fund managers on the environmental and social monitoring side, providing training on the team level, how to incorporate ESG considerations into their commercial due diligence, and so on and so forth. But on the investee level, very often we do have to do some kind of marketing to get them on board on these programs as well. So by offering this bespoke approach, we can offer something that is really to their needs and really capacity building to them, right? And not just a condition for our investment. We are working with companies with their HR policies, for instance, setting in place policies to make sure that the workplace is friendly for mothers. We are also working with some companies on their perhaps working capital requirements, on governance issues, as well as, of course, on the climate side, right, helping them improve their monitoring systems, on the reporting systems, and et cetera.
And I understand also that Sarona is itself a certified B Corp. Is that correct? No? I thought I read that somewhere. I'm sorry. Just wondering if either of you want to add to that in terms of capacity constraints, capacity building, technical assistance. Do?
Yeah, I think for the entrepreneurs in the audience, for Touchstone, we having several programs to support founders. The first program is called Net Zero Challenge. So we launched it for the first time last year in partnership with Temasek Foundation. So Temasek Foundation will give grants, so completely equity-free, debt-free prizes up to 15 billion Vietnam dong to 3 winners for energy, agriculture, and circular economy. So this year, after a successful challenge last year, we attracted 300 companies to the challenge. So we're going to continue this platform this year. And not only do we give prize as the sponsorship from Temasek Foundation, we bring in corporate partners to help the startups using the grants for specific pilots in Vietnam. So that's the first program. So stay tuned. We're going to launch sometime in this summer. The second program, as a reflection from Net Zero Challenge, we've seen that there's so many more companies working on this issue than we expected. We really internally expected 100 and we attracted 300. And with the challenge, we were able to support 3 winners. What about the rest of the 297 companies in the market? So this year, to continue the capacity development side, we're gonna launch an accelerator focusing on energy, also for Vietnam. So for the founders who join this accelerator, we're gonna bring in mentors and really help you get to know the investors as early as possible, and also get to know the grants, the philanthropy of the region who might be able to come in and help you for the demonstration so that it can help you reduce the burden of the bootstrapping in the early day. So those are the 2 structure platforms, programs that we have currently. We looking for more corporate partners and ideas. Even though we have a small team, we're really here to solve other challenges in Vietnam, be it agriculture, education, and healthcare. And then we really want to work together with different partners in this journey.
Just wanted to ask you, Andy, if you have anything to add to that from the Stride perspective. Importance of capacity building.
Oh, sorry. Can I add one more thing? One more thing. The accelerator will have price, equity free, and no debt either. So and no fees. So it's a really great program for founders. We able to get a sponsor for the program. So please apply or spread the words out to your friends to apply for this accelerator.
I'll be applying. Yeah, I think in terms of capacity building, for founders in this area, we don't necessarily have all the skills, right, that are needed to build a large-scale company from the get-go, right? So there may be certain founders that are very technical or have an engineering background, but they don't understand about how equity works, debt, financing, etc. Or there may be people in my case that understood more about the finance side, but we didn't really have really depth in detail understanding of, say, how solar and energy works, right? So I think having these assistance type programs are something that's very, very useful for founders. And when it can also be that it's like a grant type situation where you're not giving away equity, that's very important. Because particularly where you have multiple founders, we have to think about dilution and those aspects. So I think more of these assistance programs are needed in this market.
Okay, thanks. I'm just conscious of time. We've got about 12 minutes left. Now, we'd like to give 10 minutes left. We'd like to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. I wanted to also ask the 3 of you about what's missing or what's an exciting trend that we should look out for. I wonder if we should speak about that now or if we should go to the audience for questions. Maybe we go to that question now and as food for thought, and then you can prepare your questions. Hopefully we'll have a bit of time. So the question is really what is missing in terms of climate solutions and inclusions in a just energy transition, or what might be an exciting trend that we need to look out for. And I'm thinking from a regulatory perspective, from a policy perspective, from a financing perspective, behavioral perspective even. Does that make sense, too?
Yeah, I think what's missing is inclusion. So there's a lot of funding focusing on mitigation, not enough on adaptation. And when we talk about adaptation, large focus should be on agriculture. And on agriculture, the inclusion here means when we go out and look for insights, when we go out to do research, we need to involve different voices, be it a farmer in Vietnam who's here for 70 years, right? So these people actually know some native wisdom to agriculture to rice cultivation, for example, that we need to listen from. And then we also need to engage with local universities. We need to engage corporate partners and the founders. So it's more of an inclusion lens when we look at, when we think about who we go out and engage to the journey. Yeah, that's more behavioral and I guess investment teams.
Okay, inclusion. Linda, from your perspective.
I think that in terms of getting more funding into what we're trying to achieve, there are pools of capital out there today. There is concessionary grants, there are NGOs, there's philanthropic capital as well. But how do we do it in the most effective manner that is really going to help the ecosystem and to get to the underlying SMEs that do need to grow? I do think that, a lot of the institutions out there, unfortunately, due to their scale, as Andy said, they don't get out of bed except for a certain quantum. Because of that, they do have to have a very standard approach, but that may not be the most effective when we are targeting the small end of the market. I do think we do need a more bespoke model, a more hands-on working with the companies, a more patient capital, perhaps. And that's where Sarona and the ADI program really hopes to come in.
Andy?
Yeah, I think in terms of the trends and looking forward, I think at the moment, there's a lot of discussions on the regulatory front and policy front in terms of, energy, solar and related aspects. And sometimes that can feel a little bit negative because things can take a long time. But I think, what we need to do is think of the bigger picture and long term, right? We know that Vietnam's energy demands will increase by 5 times, right, by 2050, right? That requires a huge investment in Vietnam, right? So we have to times 5 all the current energy usage. That means there's going to be a whole range of new energy sources which need to be built. So these things will get sorted out in the longer run. What we need to do is just work out how we can balance things to keep companies like ours to keep going and to keep, to attract the right funding, keep growing, and then those opportunities will be there, and they'll be there in a very big way.
Okay, thanks. So we've heard about policy issues, financing, behavioral issues. I think we have 5 minutes left. Do we have one question from the audience? I think I see somebody at the back. And if you could let us know to whom you're addressing your question.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess my question will be for the panel as a whole. So I'm coming from a DFI under the British government called BII. So, I don't want to make this all about myself, so I'm going to ask about what DFIs in general can do better to address these challenges in Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. We've spoken to BII in the past, and they do great things. Look, to be really honest, the issue, I think, is that you're looking to deploy funds, but again, it's that ticket size is quite large. So when we do our presentation and show this is where we are and this is where we want to be, organizations like BII will come and say, well, that's great, really good what you're doing. Come back when you're, 20 million, 30, 50, whatever. Again, I think the big gap and the opportunity is in that middle space. It's below that. How can we deploy funds that are 1 million, 2 million, 5, right? In those early stage startups. And I think a lot of the challenge, or I'm guessing a lot of the challenge from the organizations comes about their structure and their costs, and there's legal costs, and there's a whole bunch of things that they have to pay for. Well, let's innovate. Let's get better at that. That's solvable. Process is very solvable things which we can do, right? Become more efficient. If you can do that in Vietnam and emerging markets, we will see far more companies prosper and thrive.
Do you have anything to add, Linda, from your perspective?
well, I don't want to speak too much about my former employer, but I would say that really the difficulty is that many of the DFIs are regulated today, regulated under banking regulations, for instance. On the lending side of the business, they might be targeting, as Andy said, the larger companies that already have significant asset coverage ratios. And that's really not driving the sort of impact that we are trying to achieve, right? Those companies can very well get their financing from the banks, and coming to the DFIs will be the last resort. Then that usually is not a project that deserves to be funded if you're looking at it from a long-term sustainable perspective. So I think we do need to be much more flexible around our policies, the way we administer the programs. I think a lot can be done on the technical assistance side, but today my experience has been, different organizations take it differently. I think some of them will take a more, we give you the set of standards we require, then you go figure it out yourselves. Others may have a pool of capital that says we can come and help you get to where we would like you to go to do this capacity building. But unfortunately, because we have 100 or 200 clients, we can't give a bespoke model to all. Therefore, we have a standard menu of items that we can do. So I think we need to think through some of these approaches and tackle the markets individually. I think the problem today is we don't have enough local boots on the ground, if I can say so. Most of the DFIs only have one or two, if not just a rep from another country nearby. So that as well creates some of these problems, not enough local presence, not being able to really reach effectively the companies that we need to get to. And that's why I think partnering with local fund partners who really do know the market well could be a good way to multiply that effect.
Thanks. I think we've got, do you want to add something very quickly and then we'll go wrap up?
Yeah, I think to support companies like Stride, we need more seed and Series A, and that's the gap in the market. And there'll be funds out there who are approaching DFI and raising more than 100 million funds and earn good management fees, but they might not be able to deliver the returns because the market's actually still at the early phase. Maybe in a few years, that's when we can expand and grow with the market, and we can talk about the larger fund structure.
We just want to wrap up. Can we each have 30 seconds for last thoughts that you would like to share with our diverse audience here?
No, I think from my perspective, this is a good start. It's a good conversation to have. I think we've got a lot of the right people in the room. Let's work together to come up with solutions. We need to be nimble. We need to think through, how we can do this, and rather than say this is the way it always was, right? This is the way it is. We have to think about what it could be.
Linda?
I think I've already said this several times, but I think in a nutshell, let's try not to use a one-size-fits-all strategy, but really to be much more hands-on with our partners on the ground.
Thank you, Yo, for being here and really keeping the optimism going.
And from my perspective, Simon Steele, who's the chair, executive secretary of UNFCCC, he talks about how to mobilize the streams of finance for climate into a torrent. So how to mobilize the billions, shift the billions into trillions. And I think that's the job of all of us here today. And so thank you, all three of you. Thank you in the audience for your kind attention. Find each other in reception spaces, at lunch, afterwards, if you want to carry on the conversation. Thanks so much to everybody.